Good morning. So last year, I can think of a handful of occasions where, as an administrator, I was put in a very uncomfortable position. A student had been either picked on, bullied, or was caught texting during class. And then I'm given the responsibility of asking the student questions, trying to figure out, A, did you do this? B, why did you do this? C, how can we learn from this? And then, more likely than not, it was going to involve a phone conversation with the parents in which I would say, hey, caught your child texting during school, inappropriate content was passed around, and now we need to have a conversation about, what is our technology policy? And then it never failed that even though it was in the handbook, many parents were like, well, what is your policy? And even staff members said, what is your policy? And so we have an acceptable use policy that pretty clearly states students can't have their technology on their person. But again, I just kept on fighting this. Like, a parent gives a mobile device to a child uses that mobile device during school hours to do something that's either a distraction or inappropriate. And then here we are as a school, and we're dealing with this pervasive problem all over and we have students as young as 12 years old coming to school with cell phones. So that kind of got my wheels in motion as to like really what's the problem, and as I found in the research, which is confirmed by pretty much every other piece of information out there prior to my research, is that we've got really universal access to technology in a way that we've never seen before inside of schools. And I think, as you'll see, the title of this presentation is Attitudes, Assumptions, and Practices Regarding the Ubiquitous Access to Technology and the Implications for School Climate. It's going to be the problem that we're going to face over the next 10, 15 years. And as you can even see here, I'm not sure we have a choice. What's a typical solution to this problem that you'll hear in staff meetings or even with parents? They'll say, well, why don't you just collect the phone at the start of school? Okay, have a little basket out, and I've even seen videos online where teachers, they'll have their teaching board right here, and then honestly it'd be like, this would be like a 5th or 6th grade class. You'll see rows of phones in little pockets right up on the board, okay? And the students turn them into the teacher, and then the teacher just has them there. And it's weird, because there you are, okay? You see the lasting power of technology. It's right here next to the lesson. And that image is, well, I'm teaching you this, but is this just as important, or is this the ultimate distraction, And you even see like a lot of teachers will, and parents, they'll say, well, they need it to access information, or there's all these different things out there. There's education apps, there's Google Classroom, and we just kind of know it's here to stay. And again, if I walk into a conference room or a teacher's lounge, one of the main topics that we're going to hear about, all right, in the conversations is, why are they always on their phone? Just another example that kind of instigated this research is, once had a parent, and this was about 6 months after parent-teacher conferences. I was calling the parent, okay, to report that the student had done some inappropriate behavior during school, whatever, okay? The parent took that opportunity 6 months afterwards to relay to me how upset he was over the fact that during parent-teacher conferences, okay, all the teachers were glued to their phones and nobody was paying attention to him or his questions. And that was his recounting of the events. So from a parent, that's a parent saying teachers, they're always on their phone, and yet at the same time teachers are always saying about kids, they're always on their phone. If you go to any kid's Snapchat or Twitter account, you're going to find pictures taken at school with hashtags, from lunchtime or class time, okay? And so, we've got ongoing integration of technology in the classroom. We've got people lamenting the fact that it's always there. And then we also have the reality that districts, okay, take a whole new level of, districts look better when they have Chromebooks. So I was at a district last year taking a cohort class, okay, and a lot of the teachers there were talking about, yeah, we just became a Chromebook district. It's like a qualifier that becomes the main descriptor for your school performance in a sense. And what they were saying was how all the students, they get a Chromebook and it's with them for their 4 years. And they were always like right before classes started, they'd be saying, yeah, this student was caught doing this student was caught doing this student was caught doing this. The Chromebooks are school property issued to the student. And the teachers and the administration can see what they're doing on their Chromebooks 24 hours a day, even when they go home with them. And yet, okay, students were still doing this, that, and another inappropriate thing on them, accessing bad websites, or they might have been in a Facebook chat, and that whole comment reel, okay, which was directed towards another student who they were bullying about, right, now becomes information that the district can use in order to help carry out its bullying policy, right? So it's just kind of peculiar that we're living in this age where technology is the measuring stick for how successful we are as educators, okay? And that's just this like broad statement, yet educators all over the place are themselves lamenting it and how to incorporate it. And I guess more and more you just see the point of frustration is students use it too much, okay? And then people say, we even use it too much. So my action research question, okay, definitely a mouthful, but it was this. It says, I asked the question, is the traditional learning process compromised because of the ubiquitous access to both knowledge and alternative social networks? And there's a whole bunch of claims embedded in that question. One, traditional learning process. So let's define that. That is your teacher in front of classroom, giving instruction, students listening to teacher in front of classroom. Okay? Or teacher could also be moving around the class. So that's what traditional learning process is. A compromise, meaning are we having a much more difficult time doing what we typically do as educators because, all right, students can go online, then get information, they come to class and they could say, well, that's not what Wikipedia said, that's not what such and such said. And then social networks, I think, that term has its own connotation now, Facebook, Twitter, all that stuff. But in this question, in my mind, social networks meant real relationships with real people that take place, in face-to-face. Not relationships with people that take place over a device, as I'm texting so-and-so about whatever, okay? And then does, excess use lead to poor social skills? Because I think that's like where, the rubber meets the road in school climate, right? We could talk about, modifications for IEPs that involve students using Chromebooks to listen to books on tape because they've got this auditory processing problem or whatever, okay? Or they have dyslexia. But what really affects school climate is that people, I think, students specifically, teachers to students, teachers to teachers, administration to teachers, we're not able to really communicate with each other as well as we should because going on a device takes out the seriousness of the interaction. And we can do what we want and we don't have to deal with the consequences necessarily. So that's the question that kind of directed all of my research. And then again, just the research had its own suggestions regarding what people think about appropriate use. The questions that were asked were filled out by parents, and appropriate use might have been 90 minutes a day, 2 hours a day, 3 hours a day. Oh, I give my child an iPod at 13, or I let them get it after their license. Okay, and so appropriateness was something that is definitely a subjective, decision. Everybody does it differently, is what I found. And for school purposes, okay, now that's the parent, right? For school purposes, what does appropriate and effective integration look like? Right? So is it giving all students a Chromebook regardless of, their own behavioral patterns, Is it using Chromebooks, then you have the flipped classroom. That's another commonly used instructional technique where you give the students YouTube videos of your lesson that they go and watch at night, and then when they come to class, they're in, maybe their group settings or something, and they're talking, and the teacher is watching the students complete, the assessment in class and doing all the instruction outside of it. And so, I think it's hard for us to navigate that because if the teacher is only seeing over a screen, what does that do to the teacher-student relationship? It's really important. And note I said only. Okay, so is appropriate and effective integration a flipped classroom for every component of instruction is something that I think we should consider. Because, that example right there, educational reform, when people talk about this word, it tends to have a lot of buzz, we need to reform education. I don't think anybody disagrees with that because we see statistics about dropout rates, we see statistics about, income levels, we see statistics about students who aren't really able to get out of their parents' basements, and we're wondering why is this? What's the social cause? And then everybody says, well, schools are failing. Okay, and then schools are now beginning to say more and more, all right, technology is the pathway for us to lead this reform whereby society will no longer be handcuffed by people who don't work. Right? But another question that I continued to ask throughout the research was, is the process more important than the purpose? So technology is really good at giving you, perceivably instant results. It could actually, you could have students go take assessments, and they could be benchmark assessments, right? So say they're doing some type of modification whereby they're learning online, and then these assessments, you could even be moving along, and then you could see that they've improved, and then we could become real excited about that data, right? The data is saying this student went from this score to this score by this date, and technology is giving you all those instant results right along the whole process, and that's really exciting. Okay? But what is the purpose of that reform? It is the process becoming superior, I'd say, more important than the purpose. If we're just saying, listen, let's outsource all of our education to a screen and take a person out of any meaningful relationship with somebody, okay? Are we saying that, the end justifies the means? The end of educating people to be contributing members of society, using technology as an instrument to just get it done, all right? Is that really helping us accomplish our purpose? And, I am obviously here touting a particular ideological assumption. I think a certain way about this. We can never put aside, it's really hard, okay, what we think about something before we get into it. I think here you have two ideological assumptions. One, the purpose of education needs to be right front and center, okay? And nothing else should, confuse us or send us in a different direction. I think there's another, assumption, which is, how can we fix it the best possible way? So there's the purpose, there's the why, there's the how, there's the means. And depending on which one of those two questions you're going to start with, you're going to come to different conclusions, I think. And how did the research kind of pan out? Well, again, this was based on what parents reported to us about their assumptions, their attitudes, their practices regarding technology use in the home. And they also answered questions like, so, how would you describe your child's academic performance? And we're a small school, so as you would imagine, private school, parents that are really involved, every single response said that my child is either in, good, great, or excellent academic standing, so to speak. But then when we got into, okay, so their academic performance, a lot of parents were not really comfortable coming out and saying that technology use either positively or negatively influenced academic performance. What they did report was that 100% of children now begin using a mobile device prior to the age of 15. I probably should have put it a personal mobile device. So that's not, letting your child use a Leapfrog or a Kindle. That's before the age of 15. 100% of the kids in this small, call it conservative school, their parents give their kids personal mobile devices. Nearly 10% of children use technology for 4 to 5 hours a day, based on what the parents said. I'll probably say the great majority of children, and you can see it in your graphs there, I don't know on which page, but you can see it that I think it's almost around 80% use it for at least 90 minutes a day. And some use it for less than that too. 67.8% either strongly agree that academics will suffer, okay, to the extent that it's not limited by parents, okay? So if a parent doesn't limit technology use, then academics will suffer. But again, I'm kind of going more towards, few parents want to say that technology is going to influence, just like flat out influence, okay? They'll say, well, as long as I can limit it and control it, we'll be able to manage the process, so to speak, right? 77% either strongly agree that relationships suffer. I thought that statistic was really revealing, because that kind of really addresses the fact that parents, in terms of their assessment of it, they think they think a kid could get by using technology too much and still perform better in school, right? Against, the other option is their relationships will suffer. So they might possibly be able to do well in school, but then have, bad relationships. But the parents didn't really say to, how they're going to suffer, and the questions didn't really direct it that way either. But the takeaway here is that between either academic suffering or relationship suffering, more parents think that relationships will suffer because of excessive personal mobile device use. And so that kind of leaves us with, all right, what does this mean? Okay, we have parents who kind of are showing that if a child uses it too much, there is a danger. Yet we have, 100% of kids before the age of 15 getting a personal mobile device to use. 68% of parents limited technology uses on a daily basis. And the question is why? Well, because the danger is sensed. It's funny insofar as the statistics all kind of converged on an awareness that this is a problem. Yet at the same time, kids have access. Kids have more access. Kids have even, they have Chromebooks in school now, right? What was kind of odd to me was, if given a choice between 4 different things, okay, not just an agree or disagree statement, Mind if I see that for a second? It says, please rank the negative benefits of mobile devices. All right? 1 was inability to sustain meaningful and healthy relationships. 2 was an unwillingness or inability to communicate face to face. Those are kind of more or less the same thing. 3 was incorrect and or dangerous information or content or distraction. Out of all these, parents seem to think, okay, that next to relationship suffering, there was incorrect information. So now for educators, that's kind of weird because we're always saying to kids, go online and research. Yet we know that we have to put in certain safeguards, and generally we direct kids to specific websites where we know they'll get the right information. Right? Parents think the same way too, which, what is the purpose of education? I think it's to bring kids to a greater awareness of knowledge, right? It's what we're doing. I mean, just generally speaking, we want kids to know things and then put that knowledge into practice. And if we're saying that social skills are going to suffer because of excessive use, if we're saying that we're trying to get you to knowledge, yet you have a serious threat out there of accessing the wrong information, I think we really have to reconsider the fact that how can technology bring us closer to that purpose? So, purpose or process? We want it done the quick, easy way, which is, technology gives you that sense of instant gratification. You don't necessarily, something I can remember encyclopedias, which people said, just kind of like a starting point, but a kid actually had to open up a book, read the index, flip to the end, see different places it's mentioned, kind of evaluate where they're going to get the information they need, and then they would go get it. Technology basically does that for you. Google is an intuitive search engine. It's just more convenient, okay? So, like I said, that process has a lot of attractiveness to it for its ease of use. But I think to some extent the research indicates that we're still having this conversation, we're still having this struggle with, does this really get us closer to the ultimate purpose of education? That is to impart knowledge to kids, so that way they can go apply it in their own lives. So you guys wrote down some questions?
You did. Do you want to go?
My question is, does limiting access to technology imply that is because it has negative consequences?
Yeah.
Because I was trying to think of a correlation, in some alternative activity. If my child or a child was overusing, well, first of all, the need to limit shows that if they're given free rein, they will overuse it, right?
Chocolate.
Right. Well, what about, I was thinking, reading. Would you actually limit if your child was obsessively reading? Or excessively, whatever you want to quantify that as.
Yeah.
Would you still need to limit it?
Well, what if they read so much they had no relationships with their siblings?
Right. So you do need to limit good things too sometimes.
Yes. Yeah.
So
And
in a sense, it's not necessarily saying technology is bad on its face. It just needs to be appropriately limited.
Yeah.
Right.
That's balance is like
balance.
Balance is
right.
the thing, which I think, again, based on the responses, the research, parents see that need to balance, but that conflicts with, I guess, and this is a whole other area of research, that conflicts with our experiences. So if we all sense that, we all experience it differently. And that's as an educator or even as a parent.
I was just thinking in terms of, how we address this as schools. Your research showed that 67.8% of parents agreed that academics could suffer because of technology use. I'm wondering if, as educators as a whole, we're going to move in the direction of making formal recommendations for technology use to parents. Is that where this is headed? So I think right now it's dealt with individually in families, right?
Yeah.
Is our schools going to become part of this conversation and say, hey, based on research, we're putting forth these recommendations. I wonder if that's something to think about.
I hope that they would. The problem there is, schools are policies, which is the responsibility of the school board, in consultation with the superintendent. The policies on this, if policies are reflective of practices, it is pretty diverse with a heavy, promotion of getting it in the classroom, standardized testing is now the smarter balance. It's going to have to be done on computers. So school is kind of embodying a practice whereby this is an important thing that needs to be done. We're going to go do it on a computer for ease of use, right? So schools might make recommendations, I think, as they should, but I think that, so if everybody's doing it differently, minimally, if the attitudes and the assumptions are all suggesting that it's good, but needs to be kind of directed in a really concrete way, our practices have to therefore reflect that. And our school, obviously, we try our best with the practice of saying, you can bring your technology to school, it cannot be on your person, so that way the student can't go in the bathroom and just start to use it. The student can't take it out from under their desk. It's got to either be in their locker or in their backpack. That practice is reflective of an attitude. Schools should probably minimally use the research to say, do our practices reflect our attitudes? Because the attitudes you get in the teacher lounge is, this is the bane of our existence now. We're constantly having to monitor this, tell them to put it away. Again, back to the first thing, put up this weird little pocket pouch for all their cell phones, okay? Control, but at the same time, maybe the conversation should be like appropriate use. What does that look like? Does that look like, is that an amount of time a day? I don't know, I spend, probably 8 hours of my day on a laptop or a phone of some kind. Is that appropriate use, or is appropriate use using it for other purposes?
So did your research, your polling, whatever you want to call that, distinguish between social, recreational use versus academic or informational pursuits? Because if you use your laptop for 8 hours a day, not much of that time I don't think is used socially or recreationally. It's almost all administrative, whatever you want to call it, informational, transactional, whatever.
The questions did not distinguish, but I think another problem is do you think kids can make that distinction?
Right.
And so, I thought through that a little bit, but then I just tried to keep the questions simple. But again, there's a thought there that, and this would be like another area, should we really try to focus on can kids compartmentalize? I think our experiences would be no. If they're on their phones, they have their Facebook Messenger open. If they're doing work, they're simultaneously maintaining their social network. That's been the experience. Be another great,
I've observed that.
Yes, another great thing to research. But I think that it's hard for them to put down their Snapchat. Just watching, going on field trips, watching the amount of Snapchats they send is kind of appalling. So.
It seems like based on everything you're saying, this is gonna be something as educators we're constantly looking at, constantly reevaluating our technology policy.
Yeah.
This is just not something that's going away.
Yeah, and people have definite disagreements with the technology policies that schools have. It is, so for as much as there's, I think, patterns, I think there's a lot of disagreement. And that kind of manifests itself when we get down to what is an appropriate use, what's a good practice. So, yeah, you can hit that.